I will say one thing that's really been working for us lately is we've been with it's in the under the umbrella of our ATS rollout. There's so much excitement over it that we wanted to maintain that. We are doing this weekly drip of a video that's very much like a social media reel. And it's usually me acting like an idiot on camera for 60 seconds and doing something funny, but at the same time, I'm informing them of a decision that we've taken with the design of the ATS. And so we've been, again, able to maintain excitement and momentum. And then people are like opening it. They're looking forward to it. They're reading the communications and they're asking to be featured, which is kind of fun. And again, it just makes everybody more visible to each other in the end.
Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Johnny Campbell, CEO and co-founder of Social Talent. And this week on the podcast, we're speaking with Elle LeBourg from Hilti Group about TA transformation. Elle, you're very welcome to the podcast. I was wondering if you could give our audience a little introduction to yourself, maybe tell us where you are in the world, tell us a little bit more about Hilti and your role there.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. So, my name is Elle, and I'm currently sitting in very hot Dallas, Texas. We were just talking about the melting temperatures have already begun here. So, we've got a long summer ahead of us, clearly. But I'm the global head of talent acquisition at Hilti Group. So, for those of us who don't know what Hilti is, I did not when I first started working here. We are a construction innovation company and we exist to just make construction better from all aspects of sustainability, safety, and just the experience that people have using our products. As an organization, we are about 34,000 people strong. We're a global company represented in every continent, I guess, except Antarctica. And we have groups all over the world. My team is scattered everywhere. We've got a great COE team, again, scattered remotely everywhere, but our TA teams are based in regional hubs. Yeah, that's a bit about me. And just on a personal side, I mentioned I live in Dallas and I love to do pottery and garden. And I've got lots of chickens. So I have like all the traditional hobbies, I suppose, but they keep me very busy outside of this job.
And a bit like me, we have busy households. You have a busier household than me, which many guests don't. But you have five in the house, five kids in the house. Is that correct?
Yeah, we got 5 kiddos. They range from age of 9 to 20, but honestly, like after 3, it's the same. They just start taking care of each other and it feels like such a break too when like you have only 2 or 1. But it ends up being more work.
We'll skip the parenting podcast till next time, but we could go deep on multiple child families and what it works like. So, Elle,
Yeah.
I first actually really came across Hilti when I went back to business school as a postgrad years ago, and there was a case study on Hilti Group talking about how Hilti at the time had transformed from selling individual power tools to a kind of a business model innovation, which was essentially providing for a fee the ability to have all these tools, but not necessarily selling them as fixed assets anymore, and
Yeah.
selling a kind of service of tools, which was very disruptive at the time. I'm not too sure when that happened in the company's history, but I remember we were reading it as a case study of how a business doesn't have to change its products, but changes the way it sells. And it struck me that it was a very innovative company. That we're here today to talk about TA transformation, and I'm gathering that is continuing. That innovation is continuing. So tell us about the current iteration of that innovation. What does it look like, and what is Hilti doing in terms of its wider transformation and how that impacts TA?
Yeah. Well, anything that, impacts TA really starts with the business strategy. Because we're such an extension of that because people are the foundation of especially our business. I know many companies say that, but truly we have a direct sales model. And so we are so dependent on the talent that we put in front of the customers in the marketplace to sell programs like the ones you mentioned, which is called Fleet. So our mandate really began a few years ago where the company went through its strategic reevaluation period. So as a company, at this point it was 2020. What do we want to be in the next 10 years? And this was a discussion, that involved so many people within the company. So it was very much like I don't know, a very collaborative team effort to develop what do we want this company to look like, not just the top layers. We went through all of these workshops and then kind of outlined our business model will fundamentally change. We are still going to sell great products. We're still going to have a strong innovation pipeline of tools coming in. But what we're going to also offer our customers is more services like the ones that you mentioned, like Fleet, but also now we're going to add on software.
Mm,
And that became the catalyst to really look at how is it that we're bringing in talent. What was decided was in order to get to point A and, or from point A rather to point B in our strategy was it was going to require a huge amount of new talent coming in. And that was quantity wise and also different profiles. So by 2030, the goal, which now sitting in 2025, I can tell you what that is now, that number, but from 2025 to 2030, my team has to hire 60,000 people into this company, which is, I mean, we looked at it and we were like, did you math this correctly? Like, we didn't, that's not right. Because as a company, we're 34,000 people. So when you think about all the people that will welcome and add, just, adding additive to the culture. But then also, it does take into consideration the people who will cycle out of roles and choose to leave or be promoted to other jobs. So just we have the quantity issue in front of us. And then the other piece was the mix of profiles, which for us was going to change fundamentally. We still, about 60% of the people that we hire are the sales profile. So that direct sales, outside sales, consultative now, because we're asking them to provide more of a service to the customer instead of going on the job site and selling, a pack of tools here or converting a tool crib over here, but really getting way more upstream in the process, which takes a completely different kind of skill set. So 60% of our people ends up being that. And there we are adding heads because that's the model is, the more customers we can service, the more territories we can segment by trade, the better our results have been historically and will continue to deliver. But then we have all these other profiles, the people who develop software, the architects, developers, all these digital profiles who we've not yet really welcomed into our circle because we just weren't offering that kind of
mm,
product. And we've done a couple of acquisitions since 2020 where we're, dipping our toe in software and really learning what these companies are like and how they move, the culture, the talent profile, also what that talent expects from their employers. Very different than what we have here at Hilti. So we had a bit of an attraction issue, we'll say. We want to attract a different profile for the volume that we do. And we also want to attract a profile who never really thinks of construction as the most innovative space to be in when there is nothing but opportunity here. When you think of construction, it's something that touches every single person who lives on the planet, from housing, roads, schools. And so it can be quite motivating for somebody who's purpose driven to want to join that company, but they just have to know we exist, which is an issue for us with brand awareness. So that's what started this whole transformation. Was this big challenge in front of us. And when we looked at the current model that we had, we knew that it just couldn't support that. We were in a very reactive mode. We had super decentralized teams. We had recruiters who were moonlighting or daylighting as HRBPs and employee relations and we didn't have that focus. We also didn't do any sourcing. So we had no proactive efforts going on. And then again, we had our brand awareness issue. So when you look at all of that, you're like, okay, we have no choice but to actually change. Otherwise, we'll never meet the goal. Um, and so that was what 2022 was that discovery that okay, we have to do a lot of work in this talent acquisition space. And then so I spent the better of 23 explaining to the leadership of the organization who honestly had not thought about the way that we hire as a core competency or their role in the way that we hire. They hadn't considered that talent acquisition would need a considerable increase in resources, time, brain space, et cetera. And so it was about a year of talking about the fact that if we don't take care of the way that we hire people, then our business strategy will not happen. And you think it's a no-brainer, but when you're just in the day to day, right? And you're moving projects through, working through with customers, hiring sometimes can take a bit of a back burner. Um, so for us, we had to upend everything from the way that we structure our teams. So moving them to centralized hubs where we can align process, targets, behaviors, capabilities, all those things. We had to completely do our or redo our employer value proposition, which happened also in no 2024. I'm getting all my timelines mixed up. And relaunch our employer branding strategy, recruitment marketing. We had to implement sourcing as a capability, which meant bringing in new talent and also giving them the tools to do their job. So we needed to have a CRM that was functional. We needed to have training done for the teams. We needed to talk about the handover of those candidates. So we had nothing but again, training here to do. And then the last piece was segmenting, which here we just took a page out of the way we segment our sales force, which is by trade. So there's generally 4 trades in construction. There's your building construction, mechanical engineering, steel and metal, and I'm forgetting that 4th one, but it's
Plumbing,
there.
HVAC stuff, or
Oh, I'm forget. Oh, interior finish.
okay.
And so we have these 4 segments, and we've noticed we get such better results from our sales force, right? When they are able to focus in on a specific trade, because then they know what that customer, they know the pain points, they know what they need, they understand the applications, and they can engage with them in a much more meaningful way. So we said, hey, other organizations have segmented talent acquisition. So same premise, right? You can focus on that profile. You can get to know the talent market, understand the insights that you're seeing in data, and be able to translate that and be a real talent advisor to your people. And so we took initiatives again to segment. That was the first phase of our transformation. It's a 3-parter, multi-year. And for us, that was a little overwhelming because we were changing so much that it's just how are you gonna sustain that energy? How are you gonna sustain people's motivation for a 5-year transformation? At some point, you get fatigued. I'm fatigued right now, you know? So we had to also think about how do we do change engagement and not just change management?
And so when you look at all those priorities, right, you had to redesign the organization, move it from a decentralized to more centralized perspective, set up these geos, set up brand new competencies, look at your go to market kind of positioning, let's call it,
Mhm,
which is your EVP,
mhm.
get those all aligned. What metrics are you being tasked with in terms of being held accountable to for the business to say you're doing a good job, Al? Because I guess my experience talking to lots of folks that come on the podcast is that it often stems from the drivers the business asks us to focus on. Like I'm imagining a big part of it is completion of plan, like hitting your hiring plan in a given year. Like how close to 100% can you be? That's what's going to hold the business back. If you're 80% versus 96%, that means that the business can't grow at the rate it wants to. It can't deliver products. It can't hit sales numbers. So getting you to close to 100% as possible is really important. But I imagine you're going to be also held back by cost constraints, et cetera, et cetera. So what are the kind of dynamics you're working with in terms of metrics you have to report back to the business as the core things that they want to hear are on track or are not?
Yeah. That big one is how many of our territories are filled, and how long do they stay vacant? So for us, when we see a $10,000 or 10,000 Swiss franc impact per month that we don't have an account manager in territory. And that was an analysis that my team did to show and demonstrate how the opportunity cost of these territories open, um, how we could use some of that savings and reinvest it into talent acquisition, and honestly have it be either cost neutral or profitable because we're actually bringing in revenue. So that was part of the discussion. We wanted to keep 98%. Well, really, the goal is 100% of territories, with 98 being acceptable. Um, and right now we're sitting around 96. So we're getting closer. So just territory fill is really important. Then speed of hiring, again, because we leave money on the table when we don't have hiring managers or account managers there. So time to fill is a big metric. And I've got my doubts on time to fill as being such a, put on a pedestal metric, because I think it's really just a small sliver of the hiring story. But that is something that we've educated our hiring managers and our leadership on. And that's something that is like a common language between all of us. And so I'm willing to like accept that right now and then start to sneak in my other KPIs that I think matter more down the line when we've maybe fixed some of the more fundamental issues. So, for instance, we were starting with a time to fill of around 83 days.
Mm.
Okay, that felt really long. And when you do the math, like we did the math, and it was basically like over the course of from the 2023 to 2030, what would be leaving on the table in terms of just sales revenue? We're not even talking about other positions, but just sales revenue was equal to like 2 years worth of R&D money that we put into the pipeline. And you just think like, imagine what we could do with this money if hiring managers, if finance, if HR, if marketing, if we all aligned and were more proactive on just what we need in terms of talent. And so that was the story that we started to paint. So we started from 83 days, put in these changes, and I can say now, I guess we're about 2 years into this, or exactly 2 years into this, where we're sitting at 43 days. So we've cut out a lot in the process. A lot of the gains came from um, they came from analyzing like what was a preference in the hiring process versus what was actually better for the candidate. And when you put it in that lens, I think it's quite clear. Like, okay, we're doing this because it's our preference, or it's a band-aid to something that is broken. Or we've built it in because we've received this comment over here from this leader. And when you just focus on that candidate experience and how can we get you through quickly, and also have you, every time you interact with our company, we leave you better than when you came. And when you take that lens to it, like, again, you can be a less emotional about fixing your process and removing some of these steps. And so what was, and I'm not exaggerating, 157 steps we logged in the beginning. Like it took 2 conference rooms tables worth of post-its to get to when we open a rec to when we make a verbal offer. We
Wow.
were like, and when you see it visually like that, you're like, oh yes, something has gone wrong. So we had 157 steps. We had 30 candidate touch points, which was bananas, 16 handovers between different people. And instead of, starting to pull out, we just said, okay, clean slate. Let's just, if we were designing this again from zero, what really would we want? And then that's what we did. And then you end up with something that is far more simple. Um, and it doesn't mean it's easy to implement, right? But it's simple, it's easy to understand. And then it's a matter of convincing people and overcoming some of these like fear-based objections. And that really has taken a lot of time, more time than I thought it would, honestly.
So
But we're getting
when you look at that overall transformation, right, you're ticking a lot of boxes that we discuss in our kind of hiring maturity approach. So you're looking at org structure, getting the structure right. You're talking about the processes, making sure the processes are optimized. You're talking
yeah,
about the tools, the systems, making sure they're put in place as well. And you're talking about the, I guess, the enablement. You talked about new skilling that had to be done within the team. Um,
yeah.
like what's been the hardest thing and what's been your biggest surprise in all of this?
I know the answer to this, like, because it still continues to surprise me, was the centralization of teams. I don't know, for me, I was like, "It's free. It makes sense.
Mm.
Why would we not do this?" But it took over a year to convince some of the regions that this was the right thing to do, and that was something I really grossly underestimated, was the emotional impact
Mm.
of something like that. So that I'll take with me to any future transformation work that I do. Um, the other piece that's been I would say it's difficult because it's a heavy lift is the tech stack. So we're replacing everything. We're I just came off like 20 meetings on replacing our ATS and making design decisions. And that is also something eye-opening because, we did the process optimization work a year or 18 months ago. And so we've been practicing what this would look like. And then when you actually get into the design of the new system where you think, "Oh, okay, well, we've already done the design work, it's just simple now of translating what it's gonna look like in Avature. Like, what is the email gonna say, the clicks, all that." No, then you realize, okay, we might have global standards and processes on paper, but again, in reality, when you get and you push each region to tell you what's actually happening, you realize we've started now again to creep back. We've added things that, again, are just it's preference and it's for us and it's not for the candidate. And so it's that's been eye-opening too, is having to constantly come back and check and make sure that that change curve continues to go up and we don't slide back down and create the same issues that we have today, which is no data visibility, we're not proactive, all those things that we want to avoid with having the privilege of implementing a new system. So those things. But honestly, a lot of it's been tough, but those were my top 2.
So when you think about, lessons learned, right? Because if you look and everyone goes into a change management process like this with certain expectations, and invariably, no matter how experienced you are, it doesn't match up with your expectations. So looking at your own experience, what would you have done differently, if anything? Would it be to give more time to plan it out more, longer, or do you even have that luxury to try and give it more time?
I mean, I it is in my DNA to go fast.
Mm.
And because of that, I think I have blind spots. Like I have a big preference for change and that can exhaust people. So I think I would go back and be a little bit more, uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Just more regimented or more disciplined in let's do this and let's finish it before we open the next thing. I, again, underestimated that execution. That last mile is so much harder to complete than it is like the inception of the idea and everybody's on board. But it's like, once they actually feel the pain of change, then just to not revert back and give it the time it needs to settle before moving on to the next thing is a big one for me. The other piece was just stakeholder management outside of the HR team. Um, and that was another frustration for me because I wanna move quickly. I've got a lot to do, and the whole team does. But at the end of the day, my ability to articulate the why we were doing this and how it matters to everybody at this company, not just talent acquisition, and how it's linked to our company strategy, that's what led us to get access to resources, to time from our board that we wouldn't have gotten before. So here, stakeholder management, I know we use this as kind of this broad brush term, but it is like critical when you're going through something that really does impact the majority of the company. And so I would have spent more time building connections, doing a little bit more high touch with our most senior leaders because while I think they understood in principle, it's in the details. And at this company, to make a decision, we do tend to look for a consensus. And so when there's question marks and things aren't fully perfect, it really gets hard to get that green light to move ahead. So I would have spent more time here.
And you mentioned budgets and you mentioned spend, L. And one of the most important things a leader can do is make decisions over where to allocate resources, whether it's budget or time. What was your approach or your philosophy to the allocation of both budget and time across this transformation? Where did you put your big bets?
Yeah. So here I have to tell you a story because this it really evolved over time. When I took the role in 2023, I had this really attractive budget. And then things like wars started to break out, and we had to divest business in Russia. And then, fast forward through a lot of things that have happened, all over the world. And my budget shrank. Like it basically became a third of what I thought that I was coming in with. Yeah. And I said, okay, I have choices to make.
Mm.
And where do I want to invest? Where do I want to make that big bet? Because I subscribe to, your budget is your strategy is your budget. And those things have to be linked. And I did not want to just like spread it as thinly as I could and hope for the best, but I did want to make a big bet. And where we decided to put all those dollars in is our people, knowing that if they are feeling good about what they do, if they feel like they're adding value, if they want to wake up and speak to our candidates, that's going to impact how they sell the company. It's going to impact how they partner with hiring managers. It's just productivity in general, but mostly like their engagement and happiness. And how can we get them to feel the best about what they do? Because I think then that's going to lead to the results that we want. I think results are a consequence of those things. And so we gave all the dollars to the people, and we created this big change engagement program where we had a set of readiness labs. We had like physical assets, things that we had really moved away from, um, really after COVID, to more digital things. We wanted to, surprise, delight, the same way that we do with customers. We were taking that lens to our TA team. Like we wanted them to feel how we want them to make the candidate feel. So, we mailed everybody to everybody's office or home it was a newspaper, like a physical newspaper of our transformation. Like, so everybody's on the same page. This is each phase. This is what this means. This is what good looks like. Here's an example of where it's already happening in Hilti, because it's not all new. And then here's some where it's happening outside of Hilti. So you get a bit of an inspiration. We've rearranged how we do training, and brought, I guess, just a more engaging way to upskill. And we've also tried not to use that word upskill because then it makes them feel like something's wrong with them. Reskill. So yeah, we really put all of our money here, creating materials, these readiness labs, having things be designed really pretty, for them to look at, and then just making their experience at work so much better. And we can see that in the results. Like we see it in our retention for our TA teams, in their engagement levels. We see it just in the pure KPIs in TA. There's not one region who hasn't made significant improvement in those metrics we talked about earlier. Time to hire, time to fill. Our net promoter for candidate experience, every single region is above. Like really the most negative feedback we get are the people who are dispositioned before they get to talk to somebody who just didn't meet pre-qualification questions. So you can tell it's working. And it was I'll in maybe not so popular move at first, but there was some questions, because it is a bet at the end of the day, like all these 250 people, how are they going to come together to give us these results? And is this money well spent? Because unfortunately, it feels like when budgets are tight, development is kind of the first thing to get cut. And it's not the approach we take with customers. So why would we do this internally with our own employees? So that
You
was
you
that
mentioned
was my
some of those y you mentioned some of those tactile things, the physicality of sending out the brochures and the information. I've seen some of these things in real life. I've held some of these
yeah.
printed materials, and they're fantastic. But you also spoke about the fact that you've got this not remote team, a team distributed in different locations. How do you balance that? The last 5 years, for example, a lot of teams, especially recruiting teams, are increasingly remote, working in different geos as well. Even if you're in the same office, you might be different geos as a team. So how have you tried to balance that physicality with, your transformation? Because again, investing in the people, I assume, doesn't mean just give everyone a pay rise.
And
Um, but how did you approach that? What's your plan and strategy? What's worked for you in terms of the physicality of your team and them coming together versus virtual, and what's the right mix for you?
yeah. Well, we're lucky in that, while we have distributed teams across the world, the majority of them are going to be in their local hubs
Mm.
together. So we can take advantage of that. And part of the way that we did that was with these readiness labs where the content itself was globally designed and created, and then we would train the leader of the TA team for that region to deliver it, and they would come together to talk about those things. One we made a conscious choice of having these 4 accelerators for our transformation that were going to be like our North Star for the TA teams. So we had kind of a rallying cry, which was becoming masters of our trade and really specializing in what we're doing and becoming true partners. And then we had 4 accelerators that would help us get there. One of them being community powered, which is not something that we had ever put emphasis on. We were super siloed. Nobody knew what anybody was doing, and that was okay. It worked at that time. But now when we move to having, these global standards, perhaps shared resource hubs for marketing, for sourcing, then we need to get to a common understanding of each other. And so this accelerator was completely dedicated to how do we become a more community powered team. And so you had recruiters from Canada talking to the recruiter in Dubai, or the one in India talking to the one in Mexico. And these things would have just never happened unless we had created the forum for them to do that. And then, I think we do things that isn't particularly innovative with our Teams channels, getting the flow of information out to everybody at the same time. I will say one thing that's really been working for us lately is we've been with our it's in the under the umbrella of our ATS rollout. There's so much excitement over it that we wanted to maintain that. We are doing this weekly drip of a video that's very much like a social media reel, and it's usually me acting like an idiot on camera for 60 seconds and doing something funny, but at the same time, I'm informing them of a decision that we've taken with the design of the ATS. And so we've been, again, able to maintain excitement and momentum. And then people are like opening it. They're looking forward to it. They're reading the communications and they're asking to be featured, which is kind of fun. And again, it just makes everybody more visible to each other in the end.
I love that. I'm hearing from the overall story several things that I think resonate massively with our audience and with other stories we've heard. I love, for example, the fact that this all anchors on alignment with the business strategy. So you're not going off in a tangent on what TA wants that's
Right.
disconnected from what the business wants. You're super aligned. I love the way you've been able to take examples and learnings from what works in other departments, other parts of business around, behavioral change or the way you structure your teams and apply that into TA. So it's not brand new. It's kind of saying it works over here. So let's try it in TA. I think that's wonderful. I love the kind of people first approach to it, investing in the people rather than investing all your money, let's say, in new tech or new software, that you've really shown that commitment to the people. You've also really you mentioned stakeholder management, but you've need to manage the communication of this. Again, you talked about spending the first year just getting the alignment on this across the business and making sure people understood the scale and importance of TA getting this right. But you back it up with metrics. You've got the right metrics, the real business metrics, not, although you criticize time to hire, you're able to connect time to hire to business value and revenue, which a lot of folks still don't do in TA. So I think you've done so much that are kind of tick the box of world-class excellence in terms of hiring, Elle. But if you were to leave our audience with your one top tip, the one piece of advice to anyone else embarking on a TA transformation, change transformation, what would that be beyond what you perhaps shared already? Or maybe you want to double click on one of the pieces you've already discussed. What's your biggest tip for those who might be starting their journey, maybe Elle back in 2020?
Yeah. Um, you did such a great job summarizing it. I'm gonna need that snippet for like my annual review also.
We'll send it to you.
um, I have to double click on invest in your people. You know, um, they're the ones doing the work. They will tell you what they need. And what your job is as a leader is to be the bridge between what that business strategy is to get everybody to understand how they contribute and why it's important. And then those day-to-day tactical things, how can you make them as smooth, as seamless? How can you inject fun into this whole thing Again, so you maintain this energy that you need for the next 5 years to change everything about their jobs. So I would just say is ask ask your people first, ask the person that's been there one day, ask the person that's been there 10 years, because you're going to get a different answer. Then the other piece is I would just not underestimate humanity's resistance to change. There's one thing I think that is constant no matter where you are in the world is that everybody avoids discomfort. And what I didn't mention was I'm also an executive coach, and I've taken everything that I've learned in my formal education here and applied it to how can you get people to buy in all by themselves, right? And not tell them what to do. But how can you use amazing coaching questions, lead them to the right solution or to open up perspective beyond themselves? And that's where you then start to see the eyes light up, the light bulbs will go off is then they realize they're part of a bigger whole and they're not just like TA team sitting in Plano, Texas. They are in a global company with much bigger mandate and much bigger purpose. So yeah, I would say those things. I
Al,
will say, but I gotta tell you one thing that like
yep.
was super memorable with like our stakeholders and our hiring managers was to walk them through in a bit of a guessing game, like how many people we need to interview to get to 60,000 hires. And that was mind-blowing for people. We worked the funnel backwards. Okay, like how many people do you think we have to interview, screen, all these things or target to get to this number of people? And nobody was ever close. And again, you're educating your stakeholder on what it takes to get you those 3 final candidates. That it's not just I'm sending a LinkedIn message and then all of a sudden I have all these applicants.
I'm,
But
I'm,
really it was a tape.
I'm gonna have a stab at this to see if I can come close, Al. Right? If you're saying others haven't, you've challenged me. So 60,000 hires. I'm gonna guess that's a million interviews.
Yeah, just about.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
People
And our
people
our
underestimate that.
our conversion rate is not great, and it's not because we're super selective. I think it's just because our top of funnel needs some work. And so, even if we were to improve our conversion from applicant to hire, we're still looking at a lot of interviews ahead of
Yeah.
us.
That's a lot of work. And that's what people don't appreciate, the kind of that volume of activity that you're building for, getting those and those 1 million touch points right and making sure
Yeah.
you leave those folks with a good candidate experience. Al, thank you so much for sharing
Yeah, it's
the mid part of your journey. I'll be excited to have you back in a couple of years to see where you're going next, how that's developed. And I just admire your energy, your enthusiasm, and your very pragmatic approach to it. You make it sound easy, even though I know it wasn't.
there were
So
so many tears, so many.
you mop them up. You can put that in your pottery and try and make nice clay bowls out of those tears. They can help you. Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you on the show, Elle. As always, look forward to seeing you again in person soon. And
Thank
thanks for joining us this week.
Thanks, Johnny.
And thank you for joining us and listening to the story. As ever, if you like this podcast, don't forget to follow wherever you consume your podcasts or give us a rating, whether that be on Apple, Google, or wherever you find your podcasts. We'll be back next week with another fantastic leadership story on hiring excellence. Until then, take care and talk to you soon.